The philosopher Karl Popper, a titan in the philosophy of science, once dared to challenge the Darwinian orthodoxy. Early in his career, he labeled evolution via natural selection as almost a tautology and a metaphysical research program, not a testable scientific theory. This bold assertion sparked a storm of controversy, but the tale of Popper's encounters with Darwinism is a winding one, filled with retractions, interviews, and suggestive insinuations. Popper's initial criticism was a direct confrontation with the Darwinian consensus. Seeing the theory as unfalsifiable, he argued that it fell outside the realm of empirical science. This critique obviously did not go down well with the Darwinian establishment. Under a barrage of criticism from Darwinists, Popper appeared to recant his views in 1978. Yet in a 2020 article titled Laszlo Bencze, Karl Popper never really retracted his doubt of Darwin. We find that Popper never really recanted his criticism of Darwinism, but instead he cleverly phrased his wording in such a way so as to merely give the Darwinian establishment the superficial appearance that he had taken back his criticism of Darwinism. Specifically, the article states, Popper stated, "Darwinism is not a testable scientific theory, but a metaphysical research program." The statement aroused so much controversy and animosity amongst his academic colleagues that he was forced to recant in the following statement. "I have in the past described the theory as almost tautological, and I have tried to explain how the theory of natural selection could be untestable as a tautology, and yet of great scientific interest. My solution was that the doctrine of natural selection is a most successful metaphysical research program. It raises detailed problems in many fields, and it tells us what we would expect of an acceptable solution of these problems. I still believe that natural selection works in this way as a research program. Nevertheless, I have changed my mind about the testability and the logical status of the theory of natural selection, and I am glad to have an opportunity to make a recantation. My recantation may, I hope, contribute a little to the understanding of the status of natural selection." Note that his choice of the word recantation is significant. He might well have, more appropriately, used the words reevaluation or disavowal or repudiation. Yet, he chose the word recantation. I believe he chose the word recantation deliberately to ally himself with Galileo and to make clear that he was being persecuted by misguided and dim-witted authorities just as Galileo was. Furthermore, he writes that natural selection is a most successful metaphysical research program. But, wait a minute, wasn't that what he was to apologize for? So within his recantation, he is reaffirming his original point of view, the very one that got him in trouble. He goes on to say that he is glad to have an opportunity to make a recantation. Sure he is. He would much prefer to have a root canal without anesthesia than to recant a statement integral to his life's work as philosopher. Finally, in his summary sentence, he is glad to contribute a little to the understanding of the status of natural selection. So what did he contribute? He contributed the understanding of natural selection as a metaphysical research program, not a testable scientific theory. I never noticed these points until a friend pointed them out to me. Now they jump forth as obvious. As well, subsequent interviews with Popper suggest that his recantation was less a change of heart and more a strategic retreat in the face of an entrenched Darwinian establishment. In a 2010 article titled Dubitable Darwin, Why Some Smart Non-Religious People Doubt the Theory of Evolution, science journalist John Horgan noted that early in his career, the philosopher Karl Popper called evolution via natural selection almost a tautology and not a testable scientific theory but a metaphysical research program. And then Horgan notes that, attacked for these criticisms, Popper took them back. But when I interviewed him in 1992, he blurted out that he still found Darwin's theory dissatisfying. "One ought to look for alternatives," Popper exclaimed, banging his kitchen table. A similar sentiment was echoed in an interview with journalist Tom Bethell. Specifically, on page 14 of his book Darwin's House of Cards, Bethell states, "In 1988, I had a chance to interview Popper myself. I immediately brought up the issue of natural selection. Popper told me that his opinion had not changed. He also said he thought that natural selection had in fact been falsified by Darwin's own theory. Distortions introduced by sexual selection sometimes meant that offspring were not better adapted than their parents," he said. This persistent controversy over Popper's views on Darwinism has left many to wonder. Did Popper truly recant his initial criticism, or did he merely rephrase his words to placate the Darwinian establishment? From his choice of the term recantation to his continued expressions of dissatisfaction in subsequent interviews, the evidence suggests a clever maneuver rather than a genuine shift in perspective. Moreover, Popper's criticism that Darwin's theory is not a testable scientific theory remains as true today as it was when Popper first issued his criticism. There is simply no scientific finding that will ever falsify Darwin's theory. As biophysicist Cornelius Hunter succinctly noted, being an evolutionist means there is no bad news. If new species appear abruptly in the fossil record, that just means evolution operates in spurts. If species then persist for eons with little modification, that just means evolution takes long breaks. If clever mechanisms are discovered in biology, that just means evolution is smarter than we imagined. If strikingly similar designs are found in distant species, that just means evolution repeats itself. If significant differences are found in allied species, that just means evolution sometimes introduces new designs rapidly. If no likely mechanism can be found for the large-scale change evolution requires, that just means evolution is mysterious. If adaptation responds to environmental signals, that just means evolution has more foresight than was thought. If major predictions of evolution are found to be false, that just means evolution is more complex than we thought. As well, in an article titled Central Tenets of Neo-Darwinism Broken, Dennis Noble, president of International Union of Physiological Sciences, after noting several falsifications of Darwin's theory, stated that, if, as the commentator seems to imply, we make neo-Darwinism so flexible as an idea that it can accept even those findings that the originators intended to be excluded by the theory, it is then incumbent on modern neo-Darwinists to specify what would now falsify the theory. If nothing can do this, then it is not a scientific theory. In the end, the controversy surrounding Popper's views on Darwinism reflects the ongoing tension in science of challenging the orthodoxy of an entrenched consensus of supposed experts that seek to silence anyone who dares question their orthodoxy. Yet, the greatest advances in science are made precisely by challenging and breaking with the consensus view. As Michael Crichton astutely noted, historically the claim of consensus has been the first refuge of scoundrels. It is a way to avoid debate by claiming that the matter is already settled. Whenever you hear the consensus of scientists agrees on something or other, reach for your wallet because you're being had. Let's be clear, the work of science has nothing whatever to do with consensus. Consensus is the business of politics. Science, on the contrary, requires only one investigator who happens to be right, which means that he or she has results that are verifiable by reference to the real world. In science, consensus is irrelevant. What is relevant is reproducible results. The greatest scientists in history are great precisely because they broke with the consensus. In conclusion, Popper's criticism of Darwin and his subsequent strategic recantation is a tale of courage in the face of hostile adversity from an entrenched consensus.